Delighted on this episode to be talking with comics creator, author Jen Wang. Jen, thank you for joining.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you. I know that readers out there can check out Ash's Cabin. I think that's your most recent release, The Prince and the Dressmaker, as well as Stargazing and In Real Life. So you have a number of works that are out in the world for people to enjoy.
Yeah, they're all, I would say, fairly different books too. So if
Hmm.
you, don't like one, there's another one for you to read. But I tend to think that they all, there's like something for like any reader. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I imagine you read widely as well and probably enjoy a variety of stories, so that makes sense.
Yeah, I try to. I think nowadays I don't read as much as I would like to, but especially with comics, I have like such a huge like comics backlog. Just because it's like I when I'm working on one of my books, it's like I don't want to just be thinking about comics all the time. So I'm like
Hmm.
trying to read stuff that's like very different. And it's only when I'm not working on a project where I try to like just like read through as many comics as I can. And so, so there'll be periods where I just have like lots of comics I really want to read, but it's like I just like I don't feel like reading comics right now. I can like can't look at any more panels.
Yeah, yeah. One of the major emphasis points that I usually share is reading widely, but also the power of comics. That's one of the recurring themes. I'm curious about this world of comics and how you were drawn to it. How that sounds ironic, how you were drawn to comics, and how comics are the ideal space for your storytelling.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe just on a very basic level, I think I'm just a very visual person. I've always liked drawing. I've always um, like sort of visual guides have always been very useful to me versus just being able to read text. Yeah, I'm just like a very visual learner, I think. And I don't know, I was just always really drawn to like movies, cartoons, like a lot of people. But I think that's where I first got my sense of storytelling is just like, watching Disney movies as a kid and really sort of imagining that I was going to be like a Disney animator when I grew up. Like, 'cause I just thought like that's the job you get when you really like to draw and tell stories and you know and so I think I did read some comics when I was a kid, but they just weren't as widely available at the time. I think if I was a kid now, maybe it always would have been graphic novels and comics because you can just go to the library and or even just like at your school library, right? Like even better, that there would be like manga like in your middle school
Mhm.
library, and that would just be like the best thing ever. Um, but at the time, like I think it just wasn't really it just wasn't available. But when I did discover it in high school, I was like, wow, this is like I can just start doing this. Like I don't need to get a job somewhere or like have like a studio, sort of like like sign off on my idea or something. Like I can just it was like like the way you would just write a story in prose, like you can just do it like in your own sketchbook and in your own, like with whatever tools you have. So I think it's just very organic, like I think that's how a lot of young people do come to comics is they realize they can do it and they just start doing it.
Yeah, yeah. And, you mentioned that you connected in high school with comics and particular reading. So curious about what that step was. How did you connect with them as a reader and then later on as a creator?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that was like a very pivotal step, obviously, in my life. like sort of like development as a cartoonist. But I was like a pretty big reader when I was a kid, and like up through about middle school. I think I was, there was always something I was like really into reading. Um, and at some point in middle school, I just kind of I like couldn't, for whatever reason, I just couldn't find things that I wanted to read. I think this was a little before there was like a big boom in like YA books,
Uh-huh.
and like they existed, but it was sort of it was like a little, you had to really look for it, I think, and there weren't things that were really obvious for me to read. So I read like a couple like sort of kind of fantasy novels and things like that, but it just like um, there just wasn't a lot, and I wasn't going out of my way to find anything. It was a lot of the stuff that you would expect to read at school that was like assigned reading that was just like, that's okay, like and it's fine, but I'm not really connecting with it. I'm not like I really want to like go out and like get the next volume of this book or something. Um, but that's also, yeah, like high school then became a time when I was introduced to manga just through a friend, and that was suddenly like, oh, here's stuff that I'm kind of obsessed with this series, or like I can of course, there would always be like an anime version, for like the popular series, and I would want to watch them, but then also go back and read the manga, things like that. um and another part of it was like, you might find this interesting, I guess, but I so near where I lived in the Bay Area, there's this kind of it was like kind of a stationery store, like a Chinese stationery store, but they had manga there that was translated into Chinese that I could
Uh,
kind of barely read, but you could rent like a volume of like a book, or like a series for like 25 cents. And so I had like a membership to this place, and I would just like grab like, 5, 6 volumes of whatever I was obsessed with at the time, and kind of just like barely make my way through the books because I could read like maybe like 2 out of 5 words, but it improved my reading, my Chinese reading skills. Which is, and so my mom like loved it, so she was like, great, like let's keep you reading these books. um
yeah.
yeah, and that you know, and that really, that era kind of bridged the gap between me really not knowing what to read, but also like reading in a different language than I'm like typically reading in, and to this day I feel like it's really kind of, I don't know, like it was really important to both like my kind of reading and language development.
Yeah.
Because it's but with comics, a lot of the language isn't too like crazy, like they're, these are comics like for kids too, right? Like teenagers. And so the language is actually really easy to piece together because it's very conversational. It's a lot of like, like stop them. We gotta, like, get to the
Right.
mountain. Things like things that were kind of just right at the level that I was at. And just having that experience myself, like my English is my dominant language. Like I, grew up here, but it really made me kind of like as an adult understand, I guess, what a lot of like teachers and educators talk about when we're sort of talking about like graphic novels for young readers being like a really good motivator and like a good bridge to developing language and developing reading skills, and kind of, even just like being interested in reading, right? Because I was like, that was me, even though I wouldn't say that I'm the typical case, but I understand that, sort of like just because I had something similar happen to me.
Yeah, that's really cool to think about. Comics is working. on English skills, but then also working on other languages as well. It's kind of a universal language. Love that.
It is, yeah, yeah. Like the stories are really universal, and they're, if you just have compelling characters and, uh, just like things that I think teenagers are interested in, which like a lot of
Hmm.
manga has. Like that's, and like now I'm not like I don't really read a lot of manga, but but I get it, It's like I feel like that was an important step for me. That period of time was just like being able to have something that was like so exciting to me. Yeah.
Um, but we were talking earlier about how each of your books is kind of different in a way. You have a variety of storytelling from sort of fairy tale folklore to science fiction. There's some realism, slice of life, memoir. How do you balance all of those influences as an artist, as an author?
Yeah, I would say the variety just comes from my like my own just like need to do something very different every time. Like I get a
Hmm.
little bored, at the end of whatever project I'm working at, or maybe not bored, but just like I'm just like I feel like I have closure. I feel like I've explored this particular story. I just need something different. It's like I just want like a fresh start. So I think every book ends up being kind of um, like a like like a reaction to the previous thing I was working on. It's like I just need something like totally different. Um, and I mean, part of it's just like it's a good challenge that I guess like I need to stay creative.
Hmm.
And but also but yeah, it's also just like I think you need something that's just like a little bit new and a little bit scary to kind of give you that motivation to work on another project that's going to take another 2 3 years maybe, and like it's like it has to hold your attention for that amount of time and like keep you really excited the whole time, ideally, right? Like so yeah, so they just end up being a little bit different, even though I think at the core they're all very similar in that I guess like they're all personal stories in a way, take on um, different environments, different contexts, and yeah, and also obviously at different times of my life because like each book kind of takes place like in little 2 3 4 year chunks of my life, and then and I can kind of see sort of what I was thinking about, what I was like kind of reflecting on during those times.
Yeah, yeah. Also appreciating what you're saying there about just the sheer amount of time that goes into developing, planning, and then creating a graphic novel as well. Anything we sort of hinted at this, but anything that you'd like to say about comics as this vital space for the young reader or even the older reader, readers of all ages?
Yeah, I mean, I think like they just are very universal. There's so many different types of comics out there. Like a lot of the stuff that we kind of see, on bookshelves and at the Barnes and Noble, you see more you know, stuff that tends to be more youth oriented, because there's a lot of like kind of like superhero comics, or there's stuff that's for YA, middle grade readers. Like those are all really popular genre, or like I guess like age categories, right? But there's comics for everybody. There's like my parents aren't comic readers, but they're able to kind of learn how to do it,
Yeah.
because it's visual, right? I've actually kind of changed a little bit how I've done my comics over time because my parents in the very beginning my parents would try to read my comics and they just like didn't know like where their eyes should, like it's like where's the
Oh,
next
yeah.
word bubble, like what's the order, and once I realized like making things like legible. Like I'm not really trying to like what's my goal here? Making this like really experimental like kind of art piece or to communicate, a story. Like once I focused on that, I felt like it was something that they had an easier time with. Yeah. But also like a lot of a lot of the books are like they're pop culture. They're
Hmm.
things that
Hmm.
are from different countries. You know, we have so many books from Japan, and they're some of our most beloved stories, and it just like kind of transcends language. And Yeah, I don't know. I think like on some level, people are just really drawn to something that was made by a person. You know,
Hmm.
uh,
Hmm.
I think I think knowing that every artist has their own kind of unique personality and style and voice that comes across on the page. I think there's just something that we can't help but feel connected to, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think that's yeah, there's something for everybody, and there's so many different kinds of comics out there that like, really, if you start, maybe you start reading your kids, kind of like, graphic novel, that they got from school, but then maybe you venture out into something a little more, just, like just, um, like aged up or about like midlife or something like, those books are out there too. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I love that your parents read your books and that it informed your process. That's a cool story as well.
Yeah, like they try. It's still not like the most natural thing for them, but I think just like having people who are not readers try to read my book and then seeing what kind of worked and what didn't, kind of I feel like made me a better cartoonist, and that like, I had to think about what my priority was, right?
What is currently on your reading list, if I may ask? You mentioned that you have some titles on your reading table that are both in and outside of the comics medium, so I'm curious about that, if you'd like to
Yeah.
share.
I guess I'm currently reading more just like, prose books. I went through a long period where I didn't read physical books because I was just like kind of busy, or I was like working on a book, and so I would just be doing like audiobooks. But lately I've been really trying to get back into physical books because they just feel nice, to read, and I feel like I kind of miss that. And just coincidentally, like there was a one of those like little libraries that's like kind of on my street that somebody just put a bunch of like just like literary novels in it, and
Oh,
I was just like,
nice.
well, okay, like I'll just pick out a few. And I read the most recent one I finished. It's called it's a Kazuo Ishiguro book. Is one of
Oh,
my
yeah.
favorites, and it was one I hadn't actually read yet, but the Clara and the Sun, and I
Yeah.
really enjoyed that one. Yeah, so I felt like it was one of those where I'm just like, yeah, you can't really make a good comic out of this because one of the best things about it is that there's kind of a sort of unreliable narrator, and
Hmm.
it's all about what the narrator is telling you and not what you're able to see. And I think being able to really kind of, I don't know, like read more books that are just, they can only really exist in like the form that they're in, like the medium that they're in, is helpful for for me as like a person who might get a little too stuck on the visual aspects, so yeah.
Yeah. I enjoyed that one as well. It was a pandemic read, and it was,
Yeah.
I remember the science fiction blending with the literary very nicely. And then it also just will take your heart out and stomp on it, that book. That I remember being very emotional when I was reading that book too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I did too, and and I think it's like I have a kid now, and like reading it as like my parent too. I'm like, oh, like if I read this before, I would have felt something, but I feel like I like really like relate to it now. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I'm also resonating with what you were saying about not being sort of complicit with readings at school, but not really resonating with them or digging into them as much, and finding other things, comics and graphic novels being one of those, because young adult lit was just not the thing that it is now when we were growing up and getting to that stage. So I just wanted to point out that resonance as well.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm glad that when I look at, reading lists now for middle school, high school, it's just like it's so much more contemporary than what I was reading at the time. Like I think there would be like one or two books that was a sign that would be like a newish book, but they would be like adult books, which is good. Like I think it's good for to like read about like people who are like much older or like much more mature, sophisticated, and
Hmm.
their issues. But I think it doesn't have the same you don't have the same connection, right? Like if you're 14, 15, like there are things that you're thinking about all the time uh that just like are just very different from what like a 40-year-old is thinking about. And like of
Oh,
course like
yes.
like of course you want to kind of read more about like the things that you care about. So yeah, so I'm glad that now when I look at these like reading lists, like there're just so many more things that I think are relevant to someone who's like 14 and doesn't really have anything that they care to read about, because it's just like like I could be reading, like Shakespeare, or I could be like looking at TikTok. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Um, well, curious about what you're working on now, if there's anything that you want to share about that, as well as where people can go and find your work, find out about what you're up to, follow along, and those sort of things.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I released a newer book, Ash's Cabin, which is out now, and I'm currently writing in the writing process of a new book that will come out in, I don't know, like 3 or 4 years, like who knows. But I'm pretty excited about it because it's gonna be maybe my first like kind of adult book for a while. It's I feel like people who enjoy my books now are still gonna enjoy this book. Like I don't think there's anything that really feels like adult in the capital A sense, but it just features characters that are not teenagers.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I felt like that was just something, like once again, just something a little different that I wanted to do. That's, like what's the next step after what I just completed, like
Yeah.
maybe something featuring adult characters who are like, my age, but yeah, but I feel like spiritually I think it's still I think very similar, I think, to my books for younger readers. Yeah.
Cool. Cool. And social media, conventions, websites, things of that nature, anything that you want to mention on that front?
Yeah, I have a website, just jenwang.net, that you can find most of my books and kind of links to a lot of my information that's out there. And social media, like lately, I've like the past couple of years, I've really kind of pulled back and tried to streamline, as a lot of the social media collapse is happening. But I do have an Instagram, Wangstagram, that I will occasionally update with just events I'm doing, and um, just anything related to stuff that fans of my books might want to know. So yeah.
Cool. Cool. I love that you continue to challenge yourself and explore new ground. You make beautiful books. I'm always pleased with what I see from you, and thank you so much for the time and the conversation.
Yeah, no, I had a really good conversation here, and I appreciate, you know, you making your podcast. So yeah, thank you for having me.